Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Counterpoise podcast. I am one of your co hosts, Samantha Adams. We are down a co host today. So just me and my other co host holding it down. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Everett Stevenson, one of your co-hosts as well with the Counterpoise podcast. And today we're hitting you guys with the interesting subject, one that's near and dear to my heart. Recently, President Biden revealed his student loan forgiveness plan, and you discussed some of the criterias and the credentials that's required for individuals to qualify for those loans and the amounts that he was going to be relieving. Of course, this was met with a lot of backlash from some, of course, Republican Congress members as well as others around the world. Not around the world, but in the country as well. So we're going to discuss a little bit of amounts of student loan debts that people have. We're going to discuss the average amounts depending on the undergrads and graduate degrees. We're going to look into foreign aid that the country has given so we can compare, the total debts amounts into the aids that, our country gives into other countries. And as well as some of it against some of the tax cuts and tax benefits that individuals within this country receive as well. So we're going to go ahead and start this off by going over a little preview of the Biden student loan debt forgiveness. And essentially, what it offers is $20,000 to students who receive the Pell Grant, $10,000 in forgiveness for students who are non-Pell Grant recipients, and that individuals who have undergrad loans, they will be capped on a pay-as-you-earn basis at 5% of their income. And lastly, one of the criteria is that individuals to qualify for these loans cannot make more than $125,000 a year. So far that's been most of the criteria. And again, this is in addition to other programs that the government has as well. Like there were programs for people who worked in at public services, work for nonprofits. If you worked for school, I think like educations or schools like that, you will be able to receive student loan forgiveness as well from the government if you gave maybe I think like 10 years service working like in government entities, like if you worked for the government, whether it be, I don't know if it's like policing or if it may be policing, or I think if you work in other government agencies, if you will, you also qualify if you continue to work there for a number of years as well. And that program has already been in place for a while. Recently, there was some discussion about how individuals found it to be very challenging in order to qualify for that when they made their application submissions, that they weren't necessarily being approved, or if they missed one or two little details on the application, how they were being denied. But today we're here to talk about the newest the newest credentials that were set for the loan forgiveness. So yeah, Sam, you
Yeah.
got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I wanted to add the thing about the way that the student loan forgiveness worked prior to, because that started during the Obama administration. One of the things I wanted to add to what you said was some of those guidelines were kind of predatory, and so what this does is it's supposed to correct that. On top of that, late payments. If you were late one time, you pretty much lost your ability to utilize the program. So it just made it incredibly difficult for people because, things happen over a course of 10 years. Things happen, especially with COVID, right? Because COVID jacked a lot of people up financially, but either A, because they lost their job or they couldn't go to work, or maybe they were getting unemployment. For many people, they might have been receiving more money in unemployment than they were at their job, but there were people that were not. They were not getting enough in unemployment. And the way the student loans are based on how much money you owe in student loans prior to this determine how much money you had to pay. And sometimes that amount, depending on, how much debt you had, would be high. For some people, their student loan payment was more than their mortgage or their rent. And so, or at least half, and that's a lot. And so, this is supposed to help correct that as it giving reference to the 5% gap. So we wanted to go ahead and I just wanted to add that into that because everybody doesn't make $125,000 a year, right? And so also we're going to get into talking about that overall average student loan debt. The student loan debt average is about $1.75 trillion for both public and private schools, right? And so when you're talking about the amount of money, like a lot of people get the Pell Grant. So if you're Pell Grant eligible and you got it, you get $20,000. The average student loan debt is between $20,000 and $28,000. That is helpful. That's incredibly helpful to people who just have that much student loan debt, right? That's average. It's not everybody, right? And so I'm about to pull something up I saw on NerdWallet, and it's a chart because when you start talking about postgraduate, like people that get master's degrees or doctors, lawyers, dentists, vets, things like that, this thing outlines the amount of the type of debt people have on.
Oh yeah, Sam, before we go into that real quick, I just wanted to kind of go into another statistic that we have found as well, which looked at the 30-year period of changing of costs for tuition in the last 30 years, right? So a lot of us that may be within our lifetimes. For some of our viewers, and if not, it definitely was in the lifetime of our parents. A lot of times, for some of our viewers, it may have been. So, traditionally, 30 years ago, the average cost for education was around $4,000. Then it moved up to around $10,000. Then it moved up to around $19,000. And today, they're saying that the numbers are roughly around $38,000 for private nonprofit universities. So that's roughly to show you within a 20 to 30 year span how, the cost of education has risen on average around $34,000 to receive the same type of credentials that you would have been able to receive 30 years ago for a lot less. But again, that goes with a lot of things that's been going up in this world, with as far as housing costs, the price to build housing, the prices to build your own home and things of that nature. But I just wanted to go ahead and throw that in there real fast so that you can kind of understand the looks of how things have changed traditionally from an undergraduate degree from just 30 years ago.
Right. So hang on, I'm about to pull this chart up again so that you guys can see it, and we're just gonna go through it really quickly. So as I just stated, as it relates to undergrad debt, you can see the bachelor's degree debt on average it says 28,950. So that's anywhere between 28,000 and 20 and 28,000, right? For graduate school student loan debt, that's about 71,000. That's when you want to go to grad school. If you got the Parent Plus loan, right, the average amount that people receive from the Parent Plus loan, and you get Parent Plus loan at undergrad level. I think you might be able to get it at other levels too, but I know for me, I wasn't eligible when I went to law school for the Parent Plus loan. I know I was in undergrad. I don't know what the reason was. I just don't think we could get it then. And you guys, pardon my dog, he pops in and out. I think he has something to say about student loan. It's just that we don't speak dog, so. He wants to play, and now it's not playtime. All right, so anyway, law school debt, this thing says 145,000 is the average. I don't know what law schools they went to find out how much money the tuition was, but from my experience, it was definitely significantly more than 145,000 on average. That many of the people that I know, whether they went to my law school or not, um, paid well over that. I think in part that has to do with the public schools, like the state universities and stuff. The tuition in those schools are significantly lower, and that's probably why it dropped that amount down. But on average, most people go to private school for law school, and that is on average about 200,000. So MBA student 66,000, medical school 200,000, which is what we expected because that's, like I said, about how much it is for law school. But the thing is, medical school also is longer. It's a 4-year program, whereas law school typically is 3 years. Dental school is almost 300,000. Pharmacy school is 179,000. And then I found it interesting that NerdWallet put these in here, but I think that it's interesting to see too, right? Where you have nursing school student loan debt and they give it broken down. Like if you get an associate's degree, it's 19,000. Bachelor's degree, 23, what's close to 2,400, 24,000. If you get a master's, it's about 47,000. And veterinary schools, 183,000. One thing that I do want to mention about that student loan, about the new student loan changes, is that, like, let's say you have $21,000 left in student loan debt, and they forgive 20,000 because you were Pell Grant eligible. You still have to pay that $1,000, right? But like, let's say you owe $18,000 and you were Pell Grant eligible. They'll forgive the 18,000. You're not getting $2,000 in a refund. They're not doing that. Because I guess they can use that money for something else.
I also would say I think that one of the things that it could also benefit greatly is individuals, unfortunately, who may not have finished school but had student loan debts, right? Like, so they may have attended school, and for whatever reason, as Sam said, life comes up, things may come along, and they're not able to continue on with their education, but now they have a debt maybe to a university or a school for a degree that they maybe didn't earn, and it still may be over their heads. So, that's a group of people that a lot of times may get forgotten, but they also would be qualifying for, could possibly qualify for some of these loan forgiveness criteria.
Yeah, so I think it's important to just recognize how it works, right? And what we're looking at numbers wise, right? But so where 20,000 may be great for some, there's a lot of people that it's still, the struggle is still there. Like, if you got $200,000 in debt and you get 20,000, it's like, thanks. You know what I mean? It's if I owed a man, let's break it down to smaller numbers, right? If I owed a man $200 and somebody like, look, I gotta pay this, and they're like, okay, well, we'll just knock $20 off. You still owe 180. Like, those are little numbers, but at the same time, when you look at it in that type of scheme, it's still like, okay, well, thanks. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's like, thanks, appreciate you, but it's like it's still not enough because it's so expensive, which is why Everett outlined how things have changed over the course of the last 30 years and how much education costs.
And so one of the things that I know that we wanted to do as well was to give you guys a view of how student loan debt in comparison to maybe foreign aid is into this country. And one of the things that we looked at most recently that's been in the news is the aid in which the United States has been providing for Ukraine. And there's a recent article that was out that stated that to date that the U.S. has committed roughly around $13.7 billion or $13.6 billion to aiding Ukraine in their 6-month war. And mind you, this is just 6 months into this war. And so that's one thing that we've seen as well. There's also roughly around, I think there's some statistics that showed in 2021 there was $38 billion in foreign aid spending that was spent by the United States government, and 32 billion of it, with 32 billion that was dispersed out. And out of that 32 billion, they said around a quarter of that budget has went to around 10 countries. And given a second, I'll name those 10 countries. One of the first ones was Ethiopia, in which they're stating that the United States government has offered 1.13 billion dollars. There's this country of Jordan, which received $1.03 billion. Afghanistan, which received around 860 million. South Sudan received 821 million. The Congo received 814 million. Yemen received 814 million. Nigeria, 600 and excuse me,
803.
803 million. Syria received 774 million, with Sudan receiving 448 million. And lastly, Somalia receiving $475 million. And so, while again, 32 billion doesn't equate to the same as the 1 trillion, but it's just to show this is money that's going out of the country that's helping other individuals, while you have people that's in this country continuously working day to day to provide services, provide goods, provide skills to help this country run, function, to be one of the greatest countries in the world. And so we always found that to be very interesting to see as a political stand, because again, that was just 1 year. So I'm imagining, if you can imagine, the U.S. has been providing funding to countries for, I don't know, since its inception, I'd imagine. So we don't know what that number may have been in total, but there was definitely some interesting statistics that I found in that regard. And there's more too that we were going to touch on as well.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting. When you're talking about debt, right? Like those are not the only two ways that United States has debt, right? We borrow money from China. There's like a bunch of different things. We pay money for things. At one point there was like we was blowing money on a bunch of stuff that didn't matter, like the bridge to nowhere, things like that, And so we accumulate debt as a country in all these ways, right? But then when you talk about as a people, right? As an American people, because this, a lot of times, most of the time, well, pretty much all the time, I'm just going to make sure I say that right. Pretty much all of the time, our focus here on the Counterpoise podcast is, how to better Black people, right? And but this student loan debt thing, it affects everybody. So let me just backtrack a little bit. I went to an HBCU. Malik also went to an HBCU. And he went to a PWI, right? But when I went to my HBCU, I went to Clark Atlanta University. One of the first things we learned about when we learned about our institution is we learned about W.E.B. Du Bois and his philosophy about the talented 10th. The talented 10th was that 10% of Black people go to college. It's still around that amount, right? And so you have about 10% of Black folks that this affects. It affects probably more than that, right? But just like he said, there's a number of people that don't finish school for whatever reason. And so, you have a whole bunch of people that are already kind of at the bottom of the totem pole being held back by all this debt. And so correcting this and getting rid of this debt, I think will really, really help. And the reason why I mentioned all the other ways that we as a country accumulate debt is because, we're affected by it. We're all affected by it, right? And just Black people are affected more so. So I just wanted to go ahead and kind of give mention to that. Before I kind of transitioned a little bit into something that I mentioned a little bit earlier in the podcast, which was about the PPP loans. So remember, like I said before, COVID hit this country pretty hard financially, right? And people weren't working and people were getting PPP loans, businesses were. And a lot of our politicians, our Congress people, whether they're in Congress or Senate or whatever, they also are affiliated with other businesses, things like that. And so they got PPP loans during the course of COVID. And so the CARES Act, amongst many other things, because it definitely gave assistance for a number of things. It gave out PPP loans to try to keep businesses afloat. It gave out PUA assistance, which was a part of unemployment, which gave people more money just because if they were affected by COVID. And it also gave housing assistance, where whether it be housing money to pay your rent, or they put the moratorium on evictions because people weren't able to pay their rent. Right. And also there were moratoriums placed on other things too, like electricity, gas, things like that. So people weren't getting freezing their butts off in the winter and they have lights, things like that. Oh, and it was also affecting internet, like the internet providers were trying to make different concessions for people right along with other businesses too, like credit card companies and stuff, just to try to help keep the economy afloat, right? But now that that's all worn up, now mind you, the CARES Act in total gave out $2.2 trillion. That's just over the average student loan debt for the country. Let's put it like that. So for years, everybody's
About
saying,
like 400 billion, but who's counting?
yeah, just, I
We'll get to
mean,
these
for
numbers.
one, it's interesting because it's like for years they've been making it seem like, oh, we can't afford to pay all that student loan debt.
Yeah.
But then in a swoop, just one foul swoop, just a stroke of the pen, $2.2 million out.
Right. Something
$1 trillion
happened.
out, gone.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so, the reason why we bring this up is because of the backlash and the pushback. Please pardon, Chino. The backlash and the pushback that was given based on the student loan forgiveness. Now it's only $20,000, right? 20,000. People were getting way more than that in PPP loans, right? And many people's PPP loans were forgiven, right?
In excess of 20,000.
Exactly. And so the reason why we say this is, let me go ahead and I'm about to pull this thing up. Shout out to the Shade Room. Sometimes it can be a little bit messy, but sometimes they really, the stories that they give us are very, very informative. Okay, so this first link didn't pull it. Just give me one quick second while I try to pull it up. But pretty much the backstory is there were, like you had mentioned earlier,
Yeah, I got you. So pretty much what happened was when the president had went up and made a speech about, his introducing his plan. Of course, there are some Republicans that came back and pushed back about this. And made it seem like, oh my God, this was just such a horrible idea. Like, oh, you're just wasting money. You're just blowing the budget and whatnot. And then the government, excuse me, the White House staff was able to respond quickly in reminding some of their fellow Congress members that they too have been beneficiaries of loan forgiveness by the federal government. And I know Sam's working real quickly to pull up some examples of such. But in the meantime, there is another article that showed that which, the U.S., I don't know who is in charge of their Twitter account, but they have been on fire the last couple of days with these tweets and their responses. They've been very quick with it. It definitely gives a Gen Z, millennial energy to it because it is very, very prompt, very quick response, witty type of responses to individuals who, again, are attacking the president and this plan that he has right here for student loan debt, and which is one thing that's going to be very helpful. So I know there's an article that they just recently tweeted out yesterday that stated that while the United States government, excuse me, just one second, I want to look this up real fast. Yeah, that the United States government is on track of bringing down the total deficit of the year by $1 trillion this year. Which great. If you can give out the money and cut it down $1 trillion, You might go ahead, throw that little chin and go ahead and do a little more, but I don't know. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying. He might could, but another statement stated that meanwhile, congressional Republicans racked up an enormous deficit with a $2 trillion tax cut for the wealthy and large corporations. And so right then and there, it kind of referenced how again a lot of individuals on within the Republican Party have been beneficiaries of, loan forgiveness to the tune of, again, roughly around 400 million, $1 billion in excess of the student loans. Right. So that was very interesting to see. And I don't know, Sam, were you able to get that article up just yet? If not, I can read it off.
I was not. What I was gonna actually do is just pull it from the shade room. And let's have it up already. If you don't, I'll just pull it.
Yeah, I actually have it up if you want me to just
Okay, yeah, go ahead, because for some reason it's not pulling.
Yeah, so there's an article provided by the Shade Room that stated that the White House calls out Republicans criticizing student loan forgiveness by sharing their forgiven PPP loans. In one of the articles, it says Congresswoman Major Taylor Greene had received $183,504 in PPP loan forgiveness. There's an article that says Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz had received $482,321 in PPP loan forgiveness. And he tweeted once, everyone knows that in a 60 billion plus European land war, it's always the last 3 billion that kicks in the door. Then there was a tweet from Republican Mike Kelly, which says asking plumbers and carpenters to pay off loans of Wall Street advisors and lawyers just isn't fair. I mean, isn't just unfair, it's also bad policy. But the Congressman Kelly had received over $987,237 in PPP loan forgiveness. It's unfair for the lawyers and the Wall Street advisors, but perfectly.
But you can get almost $1 million in forgiveness.
Correct. There was a tweet by Congressman Mark Wayne Mullen, which stated, "We do not need farmers, ranchers, small business owners, and teachers in Oklahoma paying the debts of Ivy League lawyers and doctors across the U.S." Now, mind you, again, it's capped at 125. And roughly, I'm sure we could say an Ivy League lawyer is likely making over $120,000. A doctor may be making a little bit more than $125,000. So, the statement seems to be a little bit untrue in that regards because it seems to be like a reach, but not to mention Mr. Mullen has received $1.4 million in PPP loan forgiveness, though. So then we also have a tweet here, lastly, from Republican Congressman Kevin Hern, who states, to recap, the last 2 weeks, the Party of the People has supercharged the IRS to go after working class Americans. And that tweet in particular is reference to the fact that the IRS has hired a number of agents to look after individuals, more and specifically for small business owners, to go back through their books to make sure that they are, doing the things that they said that they're doing, that a lot of these people who apply for PPP loans are actual business owners that actually have real business and it wasn't fraud, things of that nature. So it said the IRS to go after working class Americans, raise their taxes, and force them to pay other people's college degrees. And I think that that's an interesting state because, like you said, it's the working class Americans. But we just gave you guys a tweet from the White House which stated that a lot of the wealthy and large businesses themselves have received over $2.2 trillion in tax cuts available. So yeah, while you're correct, the working class is going to be paying because they're going to be the ones that actually have to pay their taxes. The people who are actually receiving a lot of the tax breaks maybe not have to pay for these loans, and they're just going to say, oh well, it's messed up because now you guys have to pay that bill even though we don't. And this is coming from a congressman who received over $1 million in PPP loan forgiveness as well. So that was
Right.
an example around 3 or 4 or 5, I guess, congressmen who received PPP loans in the past and or recently to some little in the initial fees that we're looking at for most of the average students.
Right. Gus, pardon Gina. He's on one today. But right. And so pretty much what he's saying is exactly what I was saying. You know, you can't, how do you sit there and have a problem with giving everybody that has student loan debt at on average of $20,000 when many of the people that are giving this pushback and complaining about it receive way more in their PPP loan forgiveness, like way more, close to $1 million for some, you know. And so I think that it's important to highlight the hypocritical aspects of that criticism. And so, you know, just my final thoughts on it. I think that as a whole, the student loan forgiveness is going to be beneficial to a lot of Americans, but to also a lot that don't. I mean, that have a whole lot of student loan debt, it's not going to really make much of a difference, right? And so I think that it's important to recognize that and highlight that. And it's not just coming from the place of, you know, us being lawyers, but there's also many others like doctors, people who have their master's degree, nurses even, and veterinarians and stuff like that, you know. So when you have a higher postgraduate degree, it typically, excuse me, it's helpful, but it's not gonna be that much more helpful. I think that, you know, it would be beneficial for the government to come up with something specific geared towards those who have higher student loan debt due to the types of degrees that they have. Because, for example, the Obamas, it took them years to pay off their student loan debt. They both went to Harvard Law, right? And so they had $500,000 in student loan debt collectively, right? And it took a very long time. Like it was just a few years before Obama got elected to president before they got paid. So I just wanted to make sure I say that and give that final thought. E, do you want to give a final thought before I transition into?
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. I think one of the solutions that I think could be a way that the government can achieve that is to maybe you make it at maybe 10% of their income or something like that. You know, be 5% for undergrad, maybe do 10% for graduates or something like that. But you find a way that, you know, include everybody in this because like it's disproportionately helping other individuals over some. While it is great, a lot of individuals may be able to receive a lot of help, but it's not enough for not only just all, but it's not enough for a majority of individuals. So it's definitely a start, but I definitely think that it's something that should be continued to be discussed and looked at because to the point that you made, when you know COVID hit, you know, the CARES Act came quick, boom. You know what I'm saying? We were able to see action, whereas it was conversations for years and years and years and pushed back for tons of times prior to that. So I definitely think that that's something interesting to watch for. I do want to applaud, you know, this administration for taking some action because a lot of times you will hear a lot of people just talk about doing things and make promises upon their campaign trail, and to that end, you don't really see any type of work being done. So, you know, at least they did hold their word up on that regard. So, you know, that I want to give reference to, but I think we could do a little bit more. So that's my last little words. And I know, Sam, if you want to go ahead and wrap us up with some more.
Absolutely. You know, the book of the month, right? Our book of the month is The 10X Rule by Grant Cardone. It's a self-help book, helps you with self-improvement, things like that. I myself have not read it, so that's something that I intend on reading. But I know Malik has, and he highly recommends it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have brought it to the group. But it is a self-help book, and it's I guess it's supposed to help make you find your way to being 10 times better than the best that you already are. So, it always helps to find your best self. Again, it's called the 10X Rule by Grant Cardone. And the Black Business of the Month is called the Sister Shop. It's located right here in Atlanta, in Atlantic Station. It is a Black female entrepreneurial focused. You can go in there. They have all different types of products, things like that. So it's a good place for Black women to have a safe space to sell some of their products, whether it be creams. I actually went to the eye doctor the other day, and the nurse at the eye doctor randomly brought this place up. Like, I didn't talk to her about it. I didn't mention it. She had gone and she'd got some eczema cream because she had eczema on her arm. And she said that it hadn't itched in days. And she had like a chronic patch on her arm. And so, I think it's a great thing to go ahead and look into, check it out if you can. And as for the motivational minute, normally when it's my turn to do motivational minute, I try to do quotes and stuff, but I don't have a quote today, but I do have something I want to say, right? So earlier, when I talked about going to Clark Atlanta University, our motto, we had two. One was culture for service, and the other one was I'll find a way or make one, right? And the reason why I want to focus on that is because I'll find a way or make one is something that, I live by. And I'm not the only one that lives by it. All my friends from college, they also live by that too. We live by it at school. We live by it now. And the reason why I talk about that and as it relates to, the student loan discussion that we had today is because let's say that 20,000, you got 20,000 or you got 10,000, whatever it was, it's going to help you, but it's not going to be perfect. Hold on just 1 second. Yeah, it may not be perfect for everybody, right? And although it may not be perfect for everybody, I want people to recognize that, you can always find a way. And if you can't find a way, make one. And that's where that comes from. So, I just want people to be encouraged that although that 10 to 20,000 may not be enough for you, it is enough for many, many people in this country. And you just take what you get. You know what I mean? Because honestly, based on the trend that we've been in for quite some time, we're lucky we got anything, because we probably weren't going to get nothing if we had a different president in office. And so I just want to remind people of that. And so just, stay steadfast, stay focused, and be kind to each other. With that, we're just going to go ahead and close out. Shout out to Malik. He'll be with us come Wednesday. Make sure you check us out every Wednesday at 8:30 for our What's Up Wednesday segment on Instagram Live. And also, too, you can go ahead and, follow us, like, share, subscribe. Our socials are going to be put up at the end. And, tell a friend to tell a friend. And, thanks for joining us. We love y'all, right?
Yes, ma'am. And I appreciate everybody for tapping in, watching and following. Hope you guys are getting something that nourish your soul. And with that being said, peace out. Have a good one. See y'all next week.